Welcome to This Week in Sonar. I'm Craig Fuller here with Zach Strickland, the Sultan of Sonar. It is still March Madness. It is still happening, and the Baylor Bears are in. At the time we're recording this, which is a Friday afternoon, though, my Baylor Bears have not taken the court in the Sweet 16, but they're about to. Zach, the Zags are still in it as well. Are we going to end up in the Final Four together?
My bracket hopes so. I actually have your Bears against the Zags in the finals, so
And then you ended
I feel
up
good
picking
about
the
it.
Zags.
Yeah, the Jesuits
I
are going to come out on top.
That's a really, really not great move by you. I think it's just a wrong move, personally. The Baptists will win the day over the Jesuits. So anyways, let's talk a lot about what's going on. A little bit diversion from our typical This Week in Sonar. We talked specifically about Sonar. This week, we had a big announcement that came out earlier this week that we had acquired ELDratings.com, which is an ELD rating site that was built in 2015 to provide ratings and reviews of ELD devices. We acquired it. It was built by a practitioner, a CTO in the trucking industry that was actually looking at ELD devices and which one to buy. And there was no real third-party site that had reviews, so he went and built it. And with really the maturity of the ELD market, realized that there may be an opportunity to find a more permanent home for it, where someone like FreightWaves, or FreightWaves specifically, could build other product categories. And we have launched it this week as FreightWaves Ratings. We also have expanded into drive cams, which is something that is used a lot for fleets when they're picking out ELD devices. They're also thinking about safety technology, and drive cams is one thing that they're looking at. So this is really a third-party review site and rating site that really combines user-generated opinions and reviews of the products that they've purchased and are using with editorialized information about the product itself.
Yeah, this is a big thing. I think our audience too. We have the right avenue to reach a lot of the target audience. The fact that there's so much technology coming into trucking here in the last five years or so. It didn't used to be this way. It used to be pretty, automotive driven, but now we've got a lot of tech going on. It's very difficult to wade through that sea of technology too, to figure out which thing, is going to work for me the best way. I mean, you look at Amazon and sites like that, and there's kind of these customer generated reviews, but not all of them are necessarily objective. And this, I think, is the true value of what we found here, is a very objective point of view site that allows people to go out and, really do their research and make sure they make the right product decision.
I think this is, use the Amazon analogy. I feel like it's more like an Edmunds.com, where
Right.
if you're buying product, you're not necessarily buying it on this site. This isn't an e-commerce site. It's actually a review and rating site to really bring in opinionated elements and reviews, or people have personally experienced the product, as well as editorialized content about the product, the pros and the cons, along with a rating on how that product is standing up. You have the editorialized rating, which the FreightWaves editors provide, and then you have the consumer rating, which is users of the products themselves and how they've experienced it. It's interesting because, to your point, there really isn't a place inside the industry to make all those decisions. You certainly can find out information about trucks. You're perhaps buying a new Volvo or a new Freightliner. There are places to go find out information out, but there's all this other technology that companies buy and services that they are acquiring inside this massive industry. Over $50 billion of CapEx per year is spent in trucking alone, and yet there isn't really a home for that information, and we hope to solve that.
Yeah, and also bringing the expertise into that kind of niche area, whereas a lot of the sites are kind of generalized and not necessarily a lot of expertise in that space, but we're really focusing the people that know about the type of activity they need to solve.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. So I've mentioned we have ELD ratings, which have been around for a couple of years, based on ELDratings.com and their product that they've had out for some time. We've just incorporated that into now FreightWaves Ratings. We have added drive cams to the site, which is a natural sort of product extension. And next is equipment financing. Is how do you know that your lenders are high quality or the challenges or product features of different lenders. We're going to bring some information about lenders, and there are really a dozen product categories that we have identified that make sense for FreightWaves Ratings to offer potential and prospective clients.
Yeah, I really like the financial aspect here because you're talking about a sector that doesn't have a lot of experience with that type of dealing. I mean, maybe they bought a house or borrowed money on a credit line at some point in their life, but making taking on business debt is a whole different process entirely. So I think this is a great addition to helping a lot of the people out there that may not have experience or feel really confident in that particular area.
It's also great to go shop. I mean, one of the things, if you've ever been to creditcards.com looking for a credit card, I have a number of credit cards, but sometimes, last year when I had the Delta Sky Miles card, because I wanted access to the clubs and priority boarding, but I wasn't flying. And I'm like, why do I have all these points accumulating I'm not even using? So I went on to creditcards.com and found NerdWallet's another one that people think of. I went on just to find other offers. And I think you don't really have a lot of those resources in the trucking industry. And so this is really a resource for the industry. It's completely free to use. And if you're looking for an ELD device or a drive cam or soon truck financing, you'll find that. And we'll add additional product categories as we go. So Zach, also this week, we've made a big update to the scientific rate forecast product that we offer here at Sonar. Tell us a little bit about that update.
Yeah, so over the last year or so, there've been a lot of changes in market dynamics. The algorithm that we developed, actually over a year ago now, there's been a lot of significant changes, and so we've actually figured out that we need to make a few improvements onto it, which is pretty standard for an algorithm such as this that's trying to ingest a lot of different information and project it out into the future. So. All we did was we said, all right, we need to reset a little bit and start over from, this post-COVID world that we're seeing and redefine some of these relationships. We saw a lot of this in the macroeconomic world last year where you used to see things, that had very linear relationships, unemployment levels, production levels, all kind of coincided with truck volumes and economic success. A lot of those relationships have changed over the last year. And that's no different with a lot of the underlying market data in Sonar, such as the tender rejections, tender volumes. They're all behaving a little bit differently than they were before COVID. So all the data science team did was kind of adjust the model slightly to more of a post-COVID world leaning, whereas they were using a blended model before of a little bit of the historical and a little bit of this COVID environment. Now they're using a little bit more of this post-COVID leaning to adjust the model.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because COVID broke all historical models. And at the end of the day, what had happened before COVID, at some point, seasonality will win out. But right now, we're still in this post world where if you looked at the chart and you didn't know what month we were in, you couldn't tell by looking at historical data because it's all broken right now. At some point, seasonality will return to the market, a more seasonal pattern, but it will look probably, at least my guesstimation, are quite different for some period of time than it did prior to COVID, because the world has changed quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were all thinking in March, oh, this is just a blip on the radar. And yet here we are a year later.
March of 2020.
Yeah, March of 2020.
You thought that. People thought I was nuts when I said this is going to be a 2020 item. It's going to play out. And boy, did it ever. By the way, you would have won that debate had we had that as a debate. I just want to point that out, Zach, that you would have lost yet again. Always win popularity contest. But end of the day, it's the substance that matters. Zach, I think this is certainly an important aspect of continuing to update the model. Sonar SCI has been out. Atlantic Acuity has been out. We've gotten really good feedback on how people are thinking about the volatility scores and what that means to manage their supply chain. It's all about route guide stability and how do I eliminate my volatility in my routing guide and get to a point of stability. It's a really important effort. A lot more updates. I cannot wait for the next big release, which is just a couple of weeks down the road.
Right on. Yeah, it looks exciting, especially right now with continued volatility in the market. Tender rejection shooting up again this week out of nowhere. We need all the information we can.
The Suez Canal has something to say. We haven't yet seen that impact here, but it's coming. I don't know what it's going to do, but when you block 10% of the world's GDP, that's a pretty big deal. It never ends.
They're going to need a new captain.
What I love about this industry is just how the volatility never ends.
And with the way that things are going right now, there doesn't appear to be a clear end in sight, at least for the time being. So,
but let's be honest. Supply chain logistics never ends. It's interesting. JP made a comment to me 3 years ago, and he said, or maybe 2 years ago, he said, since I've been in this industry, there's been all this stuff that's happened. It's never been like this. And I'm like, it has always been volatile. There has been, you go back to September 11th, which is really when I sort of professionalized it. That was a big event. We had the longshoreman port strikes in 2002, 2003. We've had volatility has just been a nature of the beast. This just is what we get to deal with here in supply chain. It's an exciting industry, and it's one that will always keep us on our toes. Who knows what next week holds? Well, Zach, appreciate it. Sick 'em Bears. We'll talk next week.
Right on. Go Zags.